On today's Edge of Wonder, we wrap up and mic drop a satisfying solace series when we ask the good doctor about increasing and dangerous cosmic rays causing concern at the South Pole. We'll do a deep dive discussion on China's underground bases, take a look at those strange lines in Antarctica tied to a Fitbit snafu. All this and more on our third and final installment with Dr. Michael Salla on the Edge of Wonder.
We can talk a little bit about Antarctica because you're an expert on Antarctica. You've published your book on Antarctica called Antarctica's Hidden History, and I kind of would like to maybe give our subscribers or viewers a update on what's actually happening there right now and why Antarctica is so important.
Well, the exciting news coming out of Antarctica is that more and more scientists are now talking about the ice melting from underneath. That there are things under the ice that are melting it. In the book, I talked about the vast volcanic system that exists under the ice that is melting the ice cap from underneath, which is creating all of these vast caverns and actually exposing a lot of the hidden artifacts that have been buried under the ice there for millennia. Now we go back, we're talking about 12,000 years rather than millions of years, because Antarctica has been under ice for only about 12,000 years, not millions of years. This is the misconception that scientists operate under. And this is one of the things that is becoming clearer and clearer now, that as the ice melts from underneath, all of these ancient artifacts and civilizations and spacecraft are being exposed. All major nations that have satellite telemetry over Antarctica are able to see what's buried under the ice, because as the ice cap melts, it's easier for them to kind of like penetrate, with their kind of radar penetrating technology and to see what's under the ice. Very recently, there were scientists reporting huge heated anomalies in the kind of northwestern region of Antarctica, roughly in the area where the Germans established their secret underground bases. That there's a vast area there, an anomaly that is melting the ice from underneath, and they can't explain it. They don't know. They're referring to it as kind of hot rock. It's not associated with the volcano. It's something is melting the ice there. Now, it can be a base. It can be a vast base. It can be some kind of advanced technology that is being used. But these are the things that are kind of gradually being dropped. We're seeing things like the polar ice cap, melting. We're seeing the magnetic pole shifting to off the coast of Antarctica. And very recently, one of the things that is very significant is that these kinds of cosmic rays that are coming into the Earth, they are now observed coming out of Antarctica, and that's a really big kind of event. That's one of the things that the scientists are puzzled over, because typically cosmic rays come from deep space and they enter the Earth or enter Antarctica, and they have kind of technology there to kind of monitor cosmic waves as they come through Antarctica and go into the Earth. While now they've been observing cosmic rays coming out of Antarctica at a kind of 20 to 30 degree angle, and it's like, well, that shouldn't be happening. How in the world are cosmic rays coming out of Antarctica? So this is where we get into the information about, well, is Antarctica a place where you have these cosmic portals? These portals that are conduits for cosmic energy coming through them. So, these are natural portals or kind of artificial portals, stargates. If you're a fan of Stargate SG-1, it's like, well, your Stargate portals in Antarctica. Well, was the Air Force dropping hints there? Well, there are these portals in Antarctica, and I think that is exactly why scientists are now observing these cosmic rays coming out of Antarctica at a kind of like at around a 28, 30 degree inclination. And it's like, well, how in the world is this possible? This shouldn't be possible. Cosmic rays don't operate this way. Well, if you have these portals in Antarctica that are opening up and they are connected to other planets or other regions in our galaxy, and that's where the cosmic rays are pouring in, that gives us an explanation, not only for how these cosmic rays are pouring into Antarctica, but also how these hotspots are being generated around Antarctica. So the scientists are kind of like telling us a little bit about it, but the deeper understanding in terms of like portals and cosmic rays coming through these portals is not well understood, because scientists don't know how these cosmic portals operate. And so this is what we're seeing in Antarctica. It's very exciting. We are now heading into the Antarctic summer. We're in fact in the Antarctic summer now. It's just beginning. So for the next 3-4 months, we're expecting many more disclosures as things kind of literally heat up and more things melt, and we're going to have more disclosures.
It's very strange that all of that is lining up with everything going on in the States and around the world, with the deep state being taken down. I mean, that's just really strange. Like, is this some kind of cosmic arrangement or not? But the other thing is, probably people are asking, well, I mean, you can imagine the preparation it takes to send a human into space. There's a reason why they're wearing the suit, right? It's to protect them from whatever is out in the vastness of space that could affect a human being. Do you think that these cosmic rays might have some kind of effect on human bodies? Do you think there's any danger there?
Well, a very interesting question. This is one of the things, as they began to discover some of these ancient ruins deep under the ice, they began to send teams of scientists down there with the different covert programs that were put together by the major corporations that were in charge of the Antarctic support contract. In Antarctica, basically, the National Science Foundation gives a 10-year contract to a major aerospace company to run all of the science projects down there in Antarctica on the surface. But those projects on the surface of Antarctica that are run by all of these scientific institutions, they're cover programs for the kind of deep under ice programs that are underway to investigate all of these ancient artifacts. And so Raytheon was one of the major corporations that began sending employees down there to Antarctica to investigate some of these anomalies. And this is probably where they first began to experience some of these cosmic rays. And they found that a lot of their scientists were going in there and getting sick. And so their scientists had to be evacuated. So the same thing began to happen with the Lockheed Corporation that took over the contract from Raytheon. And in 2013, they sent scientists down there, and they started to get sick. So yeah, the cosmic rays are very dangerous, as are the kind of space-time distortions associated with some of the spacecraft that are buried down there that are still active. Because a lot of the beings, and I'll talk about this in the book, Antarctica's Hidden History, that 13,000 years ago, Antarctica was flash frozen, but there was a flourishing civilization down there that was run out of these hubs that had been established by these extraterrestrials who had these 3 huge motherships down there running this global network of colonies all around the planet. So when you had the flash freezing of Antarctica, they only had time for the beings inside of these spacecraft to really protect themselves, or those near them who could kind of like find refuge in the craft. And since that time, they've been held in stasis. So the ships are still functioning. The technologies are keeping the extraterrestrials that were behind this global civilization associated with Atlantis alive. So these beings are going to wake up at some point, and they're waking up now. And as they are waking up, many of them are giants. They're getting approached by the secret space programs and being told, hey, it's Earth in the year 2018, and this is what's going down. And so That's what's happening now in Antarctica. So we can expect a lot more of that to go on. But all of these technologies are very advanced and very dangerous if you're not prepared. So yeah, the secret space program really need to protect their personnel when they're sent down there to investigate all of these spacecraft, artifacts, and any of the beings that wake up.
Going off of that as well. So like we did an episode on Antarctica like months ago, but actually one of the things that we found recently is if there's a Fitbit watch app, if you go on this online, it shows you where everybody is using this app all over the world, and it gives a heat signal. And what's very interesting is in Antarctica, specifically around where the pyramid is on Antarctica, there's a perfect outline of it looks like an underground facility.
Yeah, it's like people walking in this like...
It's perfectly designed as a facility. It's like straight lines, everything else. And obviously when you're looking on Google Maps, there's nothing there, right? So it means it has to be underground. And we were talking to some of the security people and some of the people that we know who can't really be named, and they were kind of laughing at this and like laughing as a sense where they're like, I can't talk about that. Right. So we kind of knew like, okay, there's definitely something going on for sure, especially when you look on Google Maps, there's nothing there. And then there just happened to be like some kind of like runway, airport or something.
Or some 10-mile straight line that just kind of is a dome above
Oh, that's
snow.
right. That's what we found.
Yeah.
It was a straight line, it seems to lead to nowhere. So it just seems to us like, obviously, if you even go on Google Maps, you can really start seeing there's a lot of things going on. Now there's a lot of things that seem to be covered up too, like some things are blurry on Google Maps, some things seem to be overexposed where it really shouldn't be. So it seems like a lot of people know what's going on. They're just trying to cover it up before everything starts coming out. And it seems that a lot of things are starting to come out.
Well, that's right, and this is the thing that, as I mentioned, you have kind of white world programs happening in Antarctica that are associated with the major bases there that the US and other countries have, and we know where they are on the maps. You can Google search them on the maps. But then you have a lot of these covert programs that are happening underground in these cabin systems where they're exploring or doing research on building craft. This is one of the things, again, I discussed in Antarctica's hidden history, is that the Germans set up in the 40s and 50s vast underground complexes in Antarctica that became the manufacturing centers for their secret space fleets. And in the 50s, after the Germans reached agreements with the US military-industrial complex and with the Eisenhower administration, then a lot of US corporations brought in resources and personnel to expand these programs so that that way you could have a kind of like information sharing, and it would bound back to the US in terms of the US Air Force and the Navy eventually building their own secret space programs. And that did happen later, but it took several decades, and by then the Germans moved way ahead. But these bases still exist down there in Antarctica. And interestingly, Corey Good says he was taken down to Antarctica in January of 2016, and he says that he was shown 6 of the major bases that was used by this kind of like he calls it the interplanetary corporate conglomerate, which is the amalgam of these German corporations and their secret space program that they had kind of helped equip with this US corporate effort to merge with the German program. That interplanetary corporate conglomerate had a series of 6 large industrial manufacturing facilities in Antarctica that used slave labor in manufacturing all sorts of really advanced technologies. This is one of the things about the German space program, is that it's kind of hard to believe this, but the Germans continued the policy that had been implemented by the Nazi SS, which was that the best way of maintaining security in classified programs was using slave labor. So the German program in Antarctica continued to do this, using abducted humans from around the planet. Now, it would be very interesting to kind of like see where the base or the area where the people who were using that kind of iPhone tracking device, where that is located in relation to the 6 manufacturing centers that Corey Good identified on the map. If it matches, well, there you have empirical evidence supporting Corey Good's claims there were these 6 facilities there. And that'll be interesting to see. So I haven't done it myself. You kind of reminded me to do it, but you know, I'm off to China in another day, so I might not have time to do it. But definitely, it's worth trying to match that. Right. Well, I'll actually be in China by the time this airs, so I need to be kind of pretty precise here in how I answer these kinds of questions. But I know the Chinese are very interested in the existence of US secret space programs. I mean, you mentioned Chinese hackers. You know, we need to keep in mind that Gary McKinnon in 2010 hacked into the Pentagon, NASA computers, and found all of this evidence of a secret space program. So no doubt the Chinese are very interested in whether or not the US has a secret space program. And I'm certain that they've done their best in trying to gather information on this. And I know, you know, anyone who does kind of like a little bit of due diligence would know that during the Reagan administration that Reagan did set up manned orbiting space stations using the manned orbiting laboratory as the cover program for these space stations that have been up there since the 1980s. And these space stations were weaponized. And you can go to the National Reconnaissance Office website and you can find 825 declassified documents talking about the manned orbiting laboratory, how even though the manned portion of it was cancelled, the unmanned portion continued. Nevertheless, what that means is that the Chinese, using hacking or using just legitimate kind of freedom of information kind of inquiries, would know that the US military has, since the 1980s, developed a secret space program with manned orbiting space stations, with anti-gravity craft like TR-3Bs and flying saucers that can service these craft, using things like electrogravitics and magnetic disruption technologies that Edgar Fouché talks about with the TR-3B, that the Chinese know about this, and they certainly have been developing their own equivalents. So I think the Chinese probably are far along in developing something very similar to the Air Force's secret space program and to what the National Reconnaissance Office has up there in orbit. Now we get to the real intriguing question, which is, well, you know, what did the Chinese make of someone like Corey Good and William Tompkins and others that have been talking about Solar Warden? Now, of course, Gary McKinnon talked about, you know, the fleet-to-fleet transfers and the cigar-shaped craft back in 2002. You know, anyone in China trying to understand and fathom this is trying to understand, well, you know, is this real? Is this disinformation? And that's the same question that the US had back in the 1940s when they were looking at the data from the German spies that the US Navy had embedded there. It was like, well, is this real? Is this disinformation? Are the Germans trying to, you know, get us to input all of the, you know, a lot of the resources into trying to understand these advanced flying saucer technologies, which is just fiction? So now the Chinese are doing the same thing. They're trying to work out what's real or what's not real. And so I'm going to China. I'm going to be giving talks in Shanghai and Beijing on the secret space programs. And I'll be talking about the Air Force program. I'll be talking about the German program. And I'll be talking about the Navy program. This is where we get into the whole question of, well, yeah, the fundamental thing is, does the US Navy have a program called Solar Warden, or whatever the name is now, operating in deep space with 8 battle groups deploying space carriers with dozens of spacecraft, squadrons of kind of TR-3Bs and flying saucers that are kind of like similar to an aircraft carrier group operating in deep space. Is this something that operates with the support or in collusion with Nordic extraterrestrials? The bottom line is, I'm sure the Chinese military are very interested, as was the US Air Force. Is the question: is it real? They want to know, is it real? So those are the sort of things I'll be talking about, and certainly while I'm there, I'm going to be meeting a lot of people. I'm going to hear about what's happening in China in terms of underground cities and so forth, and manufacturing areas there. But I'm certain that the Chinese are playing catch up, and I think it's actually a good thing that the Chinese are playing catch up, because if they're playing catch up, that's going to ensure that this information is it's going to be shared globally, because that's what we want. We want transparency. We want this information shared, and I think it's in the interests of the Chinese to have this information shared, because they're going to be able to bridge the gap, and in basically sharing this information, we can make sure that nothing similar to what has happened over the last decades happened, which is a vast kind of corporate, transnational corporate entity can be formed, which basically centralizes all of this advanced technology, and then using false flag technology, false flag events, and using these technologies tries to orchestrate a series of false flag events to implement a one world government where the corporations can basically run the show and national sovereignties are undermined. So I think it's in the national interest of China, Russia, the United States, Brazil, for all of them to work together to make sure this information is all publicized, brought into the open world, into the wide world. We have as much transparency as possible to ensure that we never come again to this verge. We literally were on the verge of not only civil war in the United States, but also a third world war where the United States would have been pitted against China and Russia in something that would have resulted in global devastation. And at the end of that, this transnational corporate program would have emerged out of Antarctica to implement a one world government where all power is under this. We want to make sure this never happens, and that's one of the things I would definitely be emphasizing in China. That's a good thing for all of this information to be white-worlded and transparency to go as far forward as we can.
Okay, so as you probably know, Dr. Sala, there has been a big rift in the disclosure community. There's a lot of turmoil right now, a lot of back and forth between different groups. There's a lot of people on YouTube and in different areas. They're bad-mouthing different people, etc., etc. I mean, Ben and I generally, we stay out of all of that, and we just want to support the truth. But it is an important thing to talk about, especially being people in our community and how we can all work together. And we were wondering if you had anything that you had to say about it and any thoughts on it, why it's happening, all of those kinds of things.
Right. Well, I think this is something that's not unusual. I mean, you go back throughout the history of ufology, there's always been really heated, serious debates among ufologists about where to take this. I mean, you can go back to 1989 with Bob Lazar going public, and the furor that created, and the dissension and the strife. And so we see this all the time happening as new whistleblowers come forward. You're always going to have those that are going to be saying, well, ufology or exopolitics needs to ground itself in scientific study and documentation. And those saying, well, here you have whistleblower revelation, and it's silly to demand the whistleblower to produce evidence, hard evidence that would get them in jail. Let's hear them out. What's the story? So, that's been happening for a long time. What we're seeing now with the secret space programs is not unusual at all. It's the same dynamic. You have those people saying, show me the documentation, show me the evidence. And those people saying that, look, this is a credible person. Let's go with their story. Let's look at the story. And I'm an academic, and I try to find that happy medium, that balance. That yes, we want to have, we want to have an open mind, so that we can kind of like look at the story and investigate the story. And we want to find evidence in the form of documentation as far as possible. And so that's what I've been doing with William Tompkins and with Corey Good, Emery Smith, and others, kind of looking at the documentation that is, and there's a lot there. I mean, people say that this secret space program information is just a bunch of people, giving these wild stories out there. But actually, there's a lot of documentation. You look at the documentation William Tompkins has provided, incredible information there about the reality of these things. I mean, William Tompkins and the whole kind of like space carrier groups. I mean, this goes back to the very foundations of the US Navy building flying aircraft carriers in the early 1930s. One of the things that people don't know. Well, one of the things that people aren't aware of is that the person responsible for designing those flying aircraft carriers for the US Navy in the 1920s and the 1930s, that person, Wolfgang Klemperer, was William Tompkins' boss at Douglas Aircraft Company. And what did Tompkins say they were doing at Douglas Aircraft Company in the 1950s? They were designing space carrier battle groups for the US Navy. So the same guy that was doing it for the Navy back in the 20s and 30s was doing it in the 1950s and 60s at Douglas Aircraft Company with William Tompkins. So, right there you have documentation which is undeniable, linking all of this together, showing that this secret space program information is very real. Corey Good, his testimony is very valuable because he was a participant in this program, as there have been others that have participated in this program. So this is very real, and it's going to get a lot of flack. I think above Majestic, I think what the goal there was to just get the story out, get people to put out the basic information as to what's going on. And I know that with follow-up documentaries, that's when there's going to be a lot more documentation provided, and that's where I'll be appearing more in discussing the documentation that exists grounding this secret space program information into very real historic events. As I mentioned, what was happening with the Navy's development of the first flying aircraft carriers, the development of the flying of the space stations, using the manned orbiting laboratory as a kind of cover program for this. All of this is well documented, so we'll be talking about this. Corey Good, he released 2 documents that were that he was the first person to release these 2 defense intelligence reference documents that talk about wormhole travel, traversable wormhole travel, a Stargate, or a warp engine. He was the first person to reveal these documents, and that was also very important because in releasing those documents, Corey demonstrated a number of things. First, he demonstrated that he has access to genuine insiders who gave him these real documents that are marked. They're marked unclassified, but for official use only, which meant that only someone working within the programs could have access to these documents. So Corey was the first one to reveal these documents at the end of 2017. So right there, Corey produced 2 major documents supporting his authenticity as a whistleblower who has real insider connections. The second thing was the technologies themselves, because these technologies, the warp drive and the traversable wormhole travel, these are technologies Corey discusses in his secret space program disclosures. So we're going, one of the documentaries that we're talking about, that I'm talking with Corey and Roger Richards, is all about putting out these documents and analyzing exactly how the documents and the technologies that discussed within them meshes with the secret space program disclosures of Corey Goode, and others. So that's really very exciting. And Above Majestic kind of sets the foundation for this and putting out the basic story. But now we're going to go much more into the documentation and having kind of credentialed people come forward to talk about these sorts of things.
That's awesome.
Great. I'm really looking forward to that for sure. So kind of wrap things up, I guess the final question here. So there really seems to be a really big spiritual awakening that is happening. I mean, whether like it's kind of religious for some people or it's more of like a personal experience that's happening, people are really waking up to seeing the truth that, like, for one, that there really is things out there, and two, like, there really is a divine creator that is working with all of this and doing all of this. But at the same time, you know, the cabal and the deep state, they've been trying to stop this, I guess, the great awakening that is really actually taking place. So why do you think that they are so strong on trying to oppose this? And what factors do you think are involved with this, and why do they fear this so much?
Well, excellent questions. I would say that what the deep state fears the most is our inherent ability to connect with infinite intelligence within ourselves. That, you know, whether you call it the higher self, the soul, God, whatever name you want to give it, within each one of us is an expression of infinite intelligence that has some kind of awareness of all that is. And so as we, through prayer, meditation, connect more with that, our truth meter, our BS meter becomes more accurate. We become more discerning. We're able to tell the difference because we're connected with that inner entity, that higher self. It's able to tell us more. It also connects us with others because it is the one infinite intelligence expressed through billions and trillions of life forms throughout our galaxy. So it's the one infinite intelligence expressed through everything. So as we become more attuned to that, we then begin to work with others. So it becomes a kind of like a wave of energy as we become, and we form groups and communities, kind of like spreading the information or spreading the kind of technologies. This is something that is a great threat to the deep state, because what they want to do is kind of like divide us and disempower us. Their only chances of success is dividing us and disempowering us. But if we, you know, through prayer, through meditation, go within, establish that connection with God, the infinite intelligence, you know, the creator source, whatever you want to call it, as we connect with that, our conscious mind starts to become more discerning. We become more aware of the truth. And then we start to seek out like-minded individuals. And so we form groups and communities. And in forming those groups and communities, we become empowered. That power becomes magnified. And that is why I think the deep state targeted Paradise, California, because that was an example of this kind of empowered community formed by these empowered individuals coming together, wanting to instill higher knowledge, advanced technologies. So this is why the deep state took it out. But it was their undoing, because in doing so, their systems, their satellite systems had been taken over by the White House. So I think this is why this kind of spiritual element is very, very important. And ultimately, anyone coming into this information, I would always emphasize, as happened to me, it was the same thing that happened to me in 2001, as I began to explore the Disclosure Project testimony of Stephen Greer and the hundreds of whistleblowers that he had interviewed as part of his Disclosure Project, I began to kind of like really immerse myself in prayer and meditation, because that I understood that was very important, that because as you open yourself up to this information, you open yourself up, and I can't put it any more bluntly than this, to demonic forces. As you start reading about grays reptilians, demon forces that are involved with artificial intelligence, pedophile groups, satanic groups. You are opening up a part of your psyche to these energies. And if you do that thinking that, oh, I can do this because I'm a secular humanist and, I know about Kant and I know about kind of like, they're trying to basically bring about a better world just by, kind of like using your own kind of like critical analysis of what's going on. You're not going to get anywhere. What's going to happen is that you're going to be co-opted. You're going to be used. The only way you can ensure that you are not going to be co-opted, terrorized, or taken over by these demonic forces, and they're very, very real, is by yourself being grounded in some kind of spiritual, religious tradition. So, everyone can find it themselves. We are all unique in that way, but just find something. And as you open yourself more and more to this information, ground yourself in all of this, whether it's Jesus, or whether it's Muhammad, or whether it's Buddha, ground yourself in that, because then you will truly understand the foundation of this and protect yourself from these demonic forces that are seeking people that are kind of vulnerable or open up in some way. And if you do that, then you can really find incredible things. And I'm finding amazing things all of the time. And it truly is. I live in Hawaii, and I think I've made some really good choices in terms of balancing my desire for finding the truth in what's going on, and also developing a spiritual life so that I can manifest a lifestyle that I think is in balance with nature, with the kind of higher cosmos, and with what is happening in this deep, dark world of secret operations. And so finding the balance, I think, is the key.
Well, that was a great answer.
Thank you for ending that way. That's how we like to end the episodes, with a really positive note on how to kind of deal with all of this stuff, because it's a lot of it is dark. And
especially like you said, this technologies. I mean, it's like really we're dealing all the technology. We're dealing with alien technology that was given, and who knows what's being controlled on the other side of things,
or where all of our information really goes.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the other part.
So I think by staying focused, exactly what you're saying is so important for keeping the balance of like what we're doing, and how when we look into these things and what we're using, and you said it so perfectly, so that was great.
So thank you for having me back on the show. This is Dr. Michael Sala on the Edge of Wonder, and we'll see you out on the edge.
Well, everyone, it is the end of the year. This is our last episode for the year. We wanted to thank all of you in the Edge Army, Wanderers.
We still have to come up with a name.
We're working on it.
Yeah, and we'll let you guys vote. We'll come up with some names, and you guys can vote on our YouTube page and figure out what you want to call.
But Ben and I had a great time with you guys this year.
This has been such an incredible journey. I mean, we can't thank you guys enough. I mean, when we started this channel back in, our first video was posted in January.
We had no idea.
Yeah, I had like 100 my friends from Facebook basically liked it, and that was about it. We had no idea where it was gonna go, and now it's like we're at 200. Actually, just today,
during this interview, we hit 200,000 subscribers. Which now, by the time you guys see this, hopefully it's at 230
or something like that.
But man, what an amazing year!
It's been fantastic. What did you have the most fun with? Let me say that, because people have asked me, "What's your favorite video?" And it's like, well, it's kind of broken up into categories. I think the most fun we had was dressing up for the Halloween and the Christmas one.
The most fun we had was definitely Halloween, Christmas, and the New Year episode.
Yeah,
which you all haven't seen yet, but will.
Those were the because that's fun. Publishing on next year. That's right. Yeah.
But in terms of what blew my mind the most, was really the Deep State series that you and I did, and everything coming together with not only just how they're controlling politics, but you're talking about all of the occult involved, and then even the symbolism with Saturn and all of that stuff, and then going into the Salem witch trials. I was just like, I was,
when we were researching that, every day we were just like,
minds totally blown.
Because we were just planning to do 4 series, and then it ended up just continuing on. But yeah, I would say the same thing. You know, the alien guides, I forgot about those.
Oh, yeah.
Those were really fun,
fun.
And the way that.
And man, we didn't even get to do individual episodes yet on the Anunnaki or the reptilians, which we promised to get to next year.
We'll definitely get to that soon, and
and we're gonna shake things up with those. I'll tell you what, because man, we have information no one else does.
And then the theory of evolution. We're gonna get into that soon enough.
Let's call it Darwin.
Yeah, Darwin.
Just so we don't shake too many trees.
Okay, Darwin.
We'll go ahead and expose that.
Darwin's theory. Yeah. You guys have been commenting on that a lot, so we'll definitely end up doing that soon. And we have a few other things on the list and some surprises as well.
Yeah, we are not nearly done.
We're just getting started.
Telling you all the truth. It's just gonna keep going.
And then there's some guests that we have that not like, you know, we've been featuring some very high profile people, but there's also a lot of people who have very personal stories, and we want to get those people on too to tell their stories. So
we'll definitely be getting into that, and we're going to be traveling more in the new year. We're going to be trying to find some of these crazy places and taking you with us.
Bigfoot.
We promise we'll get to that. I am going to find Bigfoot. Definitely.
That's definitely one I want to do for sure. Actually, I have a fan, or we have a fan. Her name is Mandy, and she lives in Vancouver. She lives like in the mountains in Vancouver, and she was talking about how just everybody there, even professors at universities, know that Bigfoot exists. Like everyone just knows about Bigfoot there.
That's because they're smart professors. Anyway, this wraps up this year for us.
Yeah, I guess
so guys, thank you so much for being with us.
And thank you for hanging out of this video for this long to see the end of this. All
right, guys. Well, anyway, it's been amazing. We love you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
We will see you out
on the edge of all this stuff happening next year. So thank you again, and
love you guys.
We love you.